Treasure Island is one of the most classic adventure stories out there. Written by Robert Louis Stevenson in the year 1883, when the book was first released, it was generally well received. Treasure Island was one of Stevenson's first successful books, and following its release, in the years afterward, he wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Kidnapped, The Master of Ballantrae, and Catriona? Yeah, yeah. Needless to say, Treasure Island set the bar for success pretty high, and though things like Jekyll and Hyde have come close, nothing ever quite passed it in terms of cultural popularity. So what's the story? Well, look, I'm pretty sure that you know what it is, but I'll give you a brief summary anyway. Note that brief is in quotation marks. Basically, there's a young boy named Jim Hawkins who lives in an inn run by his mother in a small town in England. His father is on his deathbed nearing the end, and then this guy named Billy Bones shows up to stay at the inn for a few nights. I'm using a photo of a skeleton because if your name is Billy Bones, I'm pretty sure that's what you have to look like. So anyway, he tells Jim that some people might come to find him and to beware of a guy who has a wooden peg leg because he's a pirate. But Jim doesn't really think much of that statement. That is until pirates invade the inn. Yeah, turns out running a hotel in the 1700s isn't the safest profession out there. So basically these pirates break in and Billy Bones dies of a stroke because he was terrified. But Jim finds a treasure map in Billy Bones' chest that leads to somewhere far away. You know, with treasure and all that stuff. So, as you probably gather, the pirates were there for that map, but luckily Jim and his mom hide until they leave. This is one of those situations where it would have been good to have a hidden room behind a painting or something like that. Would have been useful. So after the pirates leave, Jim, who's like 12 years old by the way, decides he's gonna figure out what to do with the map. His mom is pretty cool with it, oddly. As far as he can tell, it leads to some pretty bountiful treasure, so he contacts several guys who actually believe him, this 12-year-old boy with a crumpled treasure map, and those guys end up funding the expedition and hiring a crew to help them sail to find the treasure. But who did they hire? They hired a guy with just one leg! Just like, what's his name? Billy Bones said to beware! So internally, Jim's like, what? But he kind of keeps it to himself for the most part. I mean, he's a 12-year-old boy who's getting to go on an adventure to find some treasure, so his spirits are still pretty high. This is also one of those stories where the main character has been kept in a small town their whole life and they've dreamed of going on an adventure. You know, like every Disney movie ever. So the ship sets sail and Jim and the crew do the normal things that crews do, like swab the deck and all that. However, Jim is hiding in a barrel one day, as you do, when he overhears Long John Silver, the guy with the wooden leg. Yeah, that's his name. Yeah, I think Robert Louis Stevenson got it from the food chain because I'm pretty sure they came first. Man, what a plagiarist he was. Anyway, Jim hears Long John Silver talking with the other crewmates about mutiny and taking the treasure. And all that. So surprised by all of this, but also not surprised because he knew a peg leg guy was going to betray him at some point, Jim rushes to the captain of the ship and the other higher-ups, like the doctor, and warns them of the incoming mutiny. Hearing this, the captain goes, well, there's like way more of those pirates than there are of us, so I think we should probably like wait this out and stuff. After that, things get a little bit more complicated. Basically, they get to the island, and most of the pirates who plan the mutiny go to shore by themselves once the ship is anchored. But Jim kind of stows away with their boat, but doesn't make it known that he's there. Man, first he was hiding in barrels, now he's hiding in boats. What a little, he'd be good at hide-and-go-seek. So they get to the shore, and things are all good. I mean, as far as mutiny goes. But then the pirates realize that there are a couple guys there who didn't want to be part of the mutiny with them. So they're like, all right, well, I mean, we should murder them. So now Jim moves from his one hiding spot in the boat to his hiding spot in the bushes, because he's just so good at this, and he's watching from afar, but when the guys are killed in front of him, he just bolts, man. He runs off into the woods without a map or anything at all. Luckily, I mean, sorta luckily, Jim comes across this dude named Ben Gunn, who's slightly crazy, but also slightly helpful. Basically, he says he's been marooned on the island for years, and he'll help Jim figure out all this mutiny stuff if they'll take him home on their ship when they leave. And Jim's like, well, yeah, okay, that seems pretty fair. So now things get even more complicated than before, because Jim and Ben Gunn go and try to fight the mutiny, and then there are some dealings and agreements with the captain and Long John Silver, and then they have the map, and then the other guys have the map, and then there are like some skirmishes and fights, and a few crewmates die. But basically, long story short, the pirates do eventually get the upper hand, and they take Jim as a hostage with them as they go to find the treasure. Because 12-year-old boys are useful, right? Surprisingly, as the mission goes on, Jim starts to find an uneasy alliance with Long John Silver himself. Turns out he's kind of the most sane person out of all the pirates. I mean, but that's relatively speaking, they're all pretty insane. So, the group finally comes across the treasure. It's literally got like a creepy skeleton at the door. But guess what? It's not there! The whole group of pirates is shocked, but they don't have much time to whine about it because the doctor and several members of the good guys on the ship, accompanied by Ben Gunn, fire on them and wound or kill most of the pirates, except Jim and Long John Silver because they're the main characters. After that, they reveal that actually Ben Gunn found the treasure a long time ago, which makes sense since he lived there for years, and he just never really disclosed this information to anyone until now. So after all the action's over, Long John Silver, who's pretty much just in it for the money, he didn't really want to murder anyone, basically joins their side for the time being. And after that, the remaining crew of the ship spends several days hauling the treasure onto the deck so they can transport it home. So with that, the crew starts on their voyage home. Everything's all, what's the phrase? It's all peas and carrots, or something. One night, though, Long John Silver does finally sneak off in his own boat, taking with him his portion of the treasure and never being seen or heard from much ever again. Jim's a little sad, because while he was a murderous, evil pirate, he was also a bit of a nice guy, you know? After that, the crew gets home, and Jim and everybody else are rich, and the book says that Jim has nightmares for the rest of his life about gold coins. So, yeah, a bit of a melancholy ending, I guess. But that's that. Treasure Island is probably one of the most adapted stories of all time. There's Muppet Treasure Island, which is great, by the way. There's the Disney Treasure Island movie from the 1950s. There was a TV movie in 2012 where Elijah Wood played Jim Baggins. And there's Treasure Planet, too. I love Treasure Planet. It's like the story of Treasure Island, except it's in the future with spaceships and Treasure Planet. Overall, I really enjoyed reading the book, too. It's definitely a pretty plot-driven story without a ton of emotion or character, but it's a nice coming-of-age adventure, and it's pretty much the textbook definition of the hero's journey. So, yeah, this was my video on Treasure Island. The end.